You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Well, pack your virtual suitcases because today one of my guests takes us all the way back to late 18th and early 19th century England for the real buried feminist story behind how Frankenstein, the book, originally got written. And my other guest brings us into the contemporary present in Iran, where women are part of an underground feminist movement that is surfacing and whipping off the compulsory hijab. Both stories coming right up, but first we need to go inside the headlines. Months of turmoil over women's unequal pay at the BBC spilled into Parliament when a former editor blasted the Beeb for operating a caste system while testifying at a hearing of the Parliamentary Committee on Media. This follows the resignation of Carrie Gracie, the BBC's former China editor, over pay disparities, and the National Union of Journalists having lodged an official grievance last December on behalf of 121 members, with more joining the grievance later. When the BBC asked all women employees with complaints to come forward, it resulted in 298 cases. In parliamentary testimony, some women said they had experienced threats when they raised the subject of equal pay. The BBC has settled some of these cases and reduced the salaries of several male journalists, as well as pledging a full review. But 170 female employees said they had no confidence in the review. Accusations of misconduct and sexism have engulfed British politics as well. Back on this side of the pond, as you probably have heard, former fashion model, longtime Trump courtier, and of late White House Communications Director Hope Hicks testified to the House Intelligence Committee that her job sometimes, quote, required her to tell white lies, close quote. Then she followed that by resigning from her position, although multiple sources claimed she planned to leave for some time. Personally, I hope she wants more time to train and get in fighting shape for her romantic relationship with Rob Porter, whom you will remember recently resigned from his White House job after lacking proper security clearance due to his history of battering 2 former wives and a former girlfriend. I worry about Hope Hicks, this young woman's judgment. Her previous office romance was with not just any old obnoxious married man. It was, reportedly, with Corey Lewandowski. State Department officials have been ordered to pare back passages in a soon-to-be-released annual report on global human rights that traditionally includes women's reproductive rights and sexist discrimination. The directive calls for stripping passages on how much access women have to contraceptives and abortion. A broader section that chronicles racial, ethnic, and sexual discrimination has also been ordered pared down. The move is believed to have been directed by a top aide to Secretary of State oilman Rex Tillerson. Roughly 2 in 3 Americans now say gun control laws should be more strict in the wake of the Parkland, Florida tragedy, and governors of 4 Northeast states, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, all of which have among the lowest rates of gun deaths per capita in the country, have banded together in the face of federal inaction. They plan to directly share information about how guns are trafficked and sold within their borders, to do research on gun violence, which is no longer funded, that research, federally, and share information like lists of those deemed mentally unfit to own a gun, people with domestic violence restraining orders against them, and people with a warrant out for their arrest. Meanwhile, consumer pressure grows on businesses that sell firearms or have relationships with the National Rifle Association. A major U.S. outdoors retailer, the aptly named Dick's Sporting Goods, will stop selling assault-style rifles, end the sale of high-capacity magazines, and cease selling guns to customers under age 21. The list of businesses that stopped giving discounts to NRA members is now too long to share here, and it gets updated every few hours. Missouri, up-and-coming future presidential hopeful Republican Governor Eric Greitens, young and handsome, was indicted by a grand jury on a felony invasion of privacy charge, accusing him of photographing a woman without her knowledge or consent and then transmitting the photo to be viewed on a computer. Greitens acknowledged having an affair with his hairstylist in 2015. He's married with kids. But he denied reports that he had photographed her without her knowledge or permission when she was nude, taped, bound, and blindfolded. He allegedly did so in order to ensure her silence by blackmailing her. Reportedly, the Republican-controlled state legislature is actually talking impeachment. At this point in 2016, 212 women were running for the House of Representatives. This year, 431 women, at the latest count, are running. The vast majority are Democrats. Also, twice as many women are running for the U.S. Senate, and some 80 women are competing in gubernatorial contests. Meanwhile, 39 seats in state legislatures, quite a few of them women, have slipped from red to blue, and only 4 have flipped in the other direction. That's a not-so-quiet revolution going on at the state level, which is vitally important, and which progressives have not given enough attention for way too long. And let's end with the big picture. The North Pole is in the dead of winter, but temperatures nevertheless have soared above 35 degrees Fahrenheit there. That's above freezing. This happened 4 times between 1980 and 2010, but it has now occurred 4 out of the 5 past winters. The good news is that nearly 70% of Americans now say that climate change is caused mainly by human activity, which is the highest percentage since Gallup began tracking attitudes on this 2 decades ago. Gee, maybe it'll go up to 100% by the time Americans grow gills. We have to take a short break here on Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be right back with a discussion about the creation of the book, Frankenstein, which is even more fascinating than, well, the creation of Frankenstein's creature. That's coming right up.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. Can you guess what the first ever work of science fiction was? Most people can't guess. Well, it was Frankenstein, in the early 19th century, written by Mary Shelley. And 2018 marks the bicentennial of that first edition. So now, for the first time, Penguin Classics is going to publish the original 1818 text, which is very feminist, and which also includes a new introduction and suggestions for further reading by National Book Critics Circle Award winner and Shelley expert Charlotte Gordon, who's also chosen literary excerpts and reviews of the time. Now, Gordon's newest book is Romantic Outlaws, The Extraordinary Lives of Mary Wollstonecraft and her daughter, Mary Shelley. That's the one that won the National Book Critics Circle Award in biography. And her earlier works include Mistress Bradstreet, The Untold Story of America's First Poet. That was a Massachusetts honor book for nonfiction. And another earlier book was The Woman Who Named God, Abraham's Dilemma and the Birth of Three Faiths. So here is Charlotte Gordon to take us inside the headlines of Frankenstein. Charlotte Gordon, welcome to Women's Media Center Live. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here.
I am such a fan. I've been a fan since your book on Anne Bradstreet, the first the first American poet, and your Romantic Outlaws, The Extraordinary Lives of Mary Wollstonecraft and Mary Shelley, which won all sorts of book prizes, National Book Critics Circle Award, and deserved them all. I think that was like 3 years ago it came out, 3 years ago.
Yeah, it came out in 2015.
And now there is this, it's a brilliant book in itself, this fantastic introduction to the reissuing of Frankenstein in the original 1818 text by, of course, Mary Shelley, daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft. Actually, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft. And this introduction is so bloody brilliant. It blew me away. And then I reread the book for the, millionth time, because it places it in an entirely fresh, e.g. original, context, both in a scholarly way and in its feminist context, which it has always, I now see, wanted to be. So congratulations and thank you.
Oh, thank you.
There's so many goodies in this. Talk first about the context in which this was written and the theme of the outcast, the abandoned child, which the creature is. She never called it the monster. The abandoned by its father, abandoned by its creator. The theme of that in Mary Shelley's life and in actually the lives of any women who went against the strictures of that period and place of time.
Well, the funny thing about Frankenstein is that it's just such a fascinating text. And it was always taught to me as a girl in high school, and then later as, the first science fiction novel, which was interesting to me, but I really didn't see it as a feminist text or as a proto-feminist text until I became interested in Mary Shelley's life. And then I really had to ponder what role this played in her life and what kind of expression it was of her own life experience, which, as you know, can be kind of a dicey proposition. You don't want to be simple-minded when you're talking about someone's life and you're thinking about their work. It's never a one-to-one correspondence. But I began to think about how interesting it was that here she was, the daughter of a woman who died 11 days after she gave birth, and who had lost her own baby, that she would write a book that is essentially a description of a world without mothers. What does it mean to live in a world where women and women's relationships are not only not valued, but are erased and despised?
Yes.
And I think that we see when we read this novel that, in fact, injustice and cruelty and suffering ensues. And I think this is a real key to Mary Shelley's psychology and to her politics, and has been really grossly overlooked. So when Penguin came to me and said, "Would you like to write this introduction?" I jumped at the opportunity, although by this time it seemed kind of obvious to me that simply placing Mary Shelley in the context of her family and her sort of political ideals felt like, I thought, well, everyone already knows this, but really, I guess, just I already knew it.
Yes. Not, and if they knew it, then not enough. I mean, because I, for example, being a literature major, I knew that Mary Wollstonecraft had been for writing the vindication on the rights of women, had been called a whore. I mean, which of course that's always the first thing that's trotted out against the rebellious woman. She must be a whore, and that it was scandalous, and it was and then of course when the daughter ran away with Shelley, she was called a whore. Shelley was called a reprobate, but it somehow, he was the rake, but it added to his flair romantic hero image as it did to Byron's, whereas the women, literally as well as figuratively, got screwed. Their reputations were shot. So, and then to have an illegitimate child because they weren't married, and then women were killing themselves over this, literally. I guess it was Harriet Shelley's first wife, who committed suicide because of having an illegitimate child. And Mary Wollstonecraft had Fanny Imlay and was called a whore for that. So to rebel at all was immediately to be a fallen woman and to be an outcast again and again and again. And the fascinating thing to me was the theme that you bring out precisely about the eradication, the misogyny being so intense that the eradication of women in childbearing might be an aim, because this is, of course, a male creator and a male creation, in between Frankenstein and his creature. And that is something that is a feminist issue even today, with surrogacy becoming an industry, with test tube babies. Gloria and I used to have this joke that what they really want is to put us in zoos, and as soon as they'll be able to procreate, it's our dark humor of feminism. So you have hit not just one, but about 400 sensitive points in this. It's a brilliant introduction. It really is. And
well, thank you.
And the search for the context also, that I had forgotten that the original co-title or subtitle was The Modern Prometheus, and this is also while Shelley is writing Prometheus.
Yes. In fact, it's kind of part of a marital dialogue, which, in fact, a marital argument that most people don't realize, and it's not it's not actually that friendly an argument between the two of them at this stage of their lives. He really writes his Prometheus in reaction to her Frankenstein.
Wow.
And isn't that interesting? And I think, what struck me when I was writing the introduction is I felt like what I had to say was just kind of, I realize now this must be what everyone feels. It must have been what you felt like when you wrote, Sisterhood is Powerful. But I guess I just thought I was writing down the facts. And that now, looking back, I realized that in a lot of the introductions to Frankenstein, there's an obligatory paragraph on Mary Shelley's family background. Oh. And that's and then the author is often running with the themes of Frankenstein because they're such interesting themes.
Right.
But to me, the fact that Mary Shelley is the daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft is so important that it ended up, sort of, it's part and parcel of the discussion of the themes.
Yes.
And I think so many people, myself included, didn't really realize that this relationship between Mary Wollstonecraft and Mary Shelley was so crucial. I didn't realize that they were mother and daughter until I was an adult,
Really?
And I was an English major in college. Yeah, but they were, first of all, they were not taught to me as an undergraduate.
Uh-huh.
And when I did read them, I read them in different classes, one in a class on the 18th century and one in a class on the 19th century. And I didn't understand that one was mother and one was daughter.
And that was not part of the syllabus. Nobody made the connections. Oh, my God.
No one cared. Didn't matter.
Right. It's really shocking. And the way that you bring out the character of Margaret, Margaret is the female voice of reason in this book, criticizing male ambition, criticizing male usurpation, and it gave an entire new, I reread it with Margaret in mind and listening to Margaret by echo remove.
Isn't it interesting that she has to stay off stage? I think that is one of the most interesting things about the book, is that if you're trained as a feminist reader, then you know to listen very carefully and look for the silences and the gaps, and also for the characters that are mentioned maybe but don't appear in the action.
Right.
And so once you're trained to do that, or once you're looking for them, then you can hear their voices and hear their point of view throughout. And she is the voice of reason. She's the voice for relationship. She's the voice for making meaningful decisions that are not based on ambition and individuality. It's so interesting, and so few students are taught to pay any attention to her. She's, disregarded and part of the frame tale, if mentioned at all.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that was interesting to me about writing this introduction was the encounter with the old text, because I also got to help select the materials that went into this new edition that Penguin did.
Yes.
And they were so great. They said, whatever you want, essentially. And you would not believe the old materials were so, well, I mean, they were just really misguided. So, for example, they had excerpts of Percy Shelley's writings about being in in the Alps, when Mary herself had these amazing diary entries of traveling in the Alps.
Oh, my God. See, this makes me crazy. My teeth begin to grind uncontrollably.
They had long excerpts from Percy Shelley and from Byron, but not from Mary. I mean, it was shocking. It was shocking. And it was so obvious. It was so obvious that this isn't as it should be. And, the editor of the series was so terrific. She was like, oh, yes, of course, let's put Mary's voice in. So all of these things that seem so obvious to me now, I realize are huge, pieces of recovery. I just hope, I just picture high school students, picking this book up with dread and thinking, oh no, I have to read this for high school English, and now here's this boring introduction. And I so hope that, for just a few of them, it might make a little bit of a difference. It might help them understand history in a slightly different, or as you would say, I'm talking to her story, that they might get, they might understand a little bit more about how women's history has been passed down from generation to generation.
Yeah, it really is amazing how, the eradication, it's both intentional and subconscious. It's structural. And so in a sense, it doesn't have to be men sitting around saying, let's erase that. I mean, she couldn't get it published at first, and it was a very lackluster house, and it was barely reviewed, and she got no royalties. I mean, and yet she continued and supported herself and their child after his death, which was a very difficult thing at that time. I mean, this is for a woman writer to survive even now is not a piece of cake, but to do so in the 19th century is just amazing. I mean, and she managed. I had not realized or had forgotten or had passed over the fact that she also wrote. I had read some of her later work, but I hadn't read the science fiction novel set in the 1920s, and I have immediately ordered it. I wish it had an introduction by Charlotte Gordon, but probably I'll have to muddle through on my own. No, I mean, this introduction should in fact make it easier for the high school student or the casual reader or the reader who's only seen dramatizations and movies of Frankenstein and never actually read the book, because it's an extraordinarily beautiful and profound work, and with your introduction putting it in context, feminist context, and the original scholarship context. That's the double gain, because I'm sure there are people out there who think, oh, because it's feminist, it can't be scholarly, or you've done it with a feminist lens. On the contrary, what you've done is strip off the patriarchal lens so we can see the work in its actual context. And for that, I am eternally, personally in your debt.
Oh, thank you, Robin. It's funny how just saying the sentence, Mary Shelley was the daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft, which is just a strictly factual sentence, can immediately be seen as feminist, and it is feminist, and yet it's actually just a sentence. She's the daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft.
Yes.
But that means so very, very, very much.
Yes, and she sought that mother lifelong, because probably, that was the ghost that bestrode her life. And then when she ran off with Shelley, her father, Godwin, wouldn't speak to her. So she was a parentless child, very much like the creature. Listeners who are readers, not only please go out and buy this special edition by Penguin Classics of Frankenstein, the 1818 text with an introduction by the prize-winning, and deservedly so, Charlotte Gordon, but also, if you haven't read Romantic Outlaws, The Extraordinary Lives of Mary Wollstonecraft and Mary Shelley, which just reads like a novel to laugh and cry and celebrate and mourn and learn from, and is feminist to the fingertip, and has brilliant scholarship as well. Go out and buy that as well. It gives even greater context. What are you working on now before I let you go?
Well, first of all, Robin, thank you so much. That brought tears to my eyes. I'm working. My first book was set in 17th century America and was told from the English point of view,
Right.
and now I've returned to the 17th century, and I'm trying very hard to write about the 17th century from the woman's point of view, but also now with more focus on the native point of view as well.
Ah, how fantastic. I cannot wait to read it. This will be very thrilling. Thank you, Charlotte, for the work that you've done for scholarship. Thank you for the work you've done for women. Thank you for your first-rate mind, and thank you for giving back to us Mary Wollstonecraft and Mary Shelley and their intimate relationship, even though they barely ever met. The tragedy is in the triumph. So thanks again. And thank you for being with us on Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you. I loved our conversation, Robin.
Time for another quick pause. I'm Robin Morgan. This is Women's Media Center Live, which will be right back with the Surrealism Corner, and then with the woman behind those courageous demonstrations of women whipping off their head coverings, their compulsory hijab, and standing in the sunlight and smiling for their photo on Facebook that are taking place all across Iran in public. And some of them are going to jail for it. All that coming right up. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again, marching into the Surrealism Corner. So, we learned that China's Communist Party has now cleared the way for President Xi Jinping to hold power indefinitely, in effect, emperor for life, doing away with presidential term limits. Some people, including many Chinese, may shrug, unable to perceive all that much difference between a permanent autocracy and making an autocracy permanent. Still, there is a difference between blatantly acknowledging authoritarianism and feeling that you should at least have to pretend you're not being authoritarian. Meanwhile, party censors are scouring social media for subversive content and deleting images of, honest to God, Winnie the Pooh, since Mr. Xi is sometimes likened to Christopher Robin's bear. Nobody asks what Eeyore thinks about all this. Here's an item that's tragic by its very absurdity. In the village of Dapchi, Nigeria, more than 50 students, that's 50, have been missing since Boko Haram attacked with machine guns recently, just as students were leaving for the government girls' science and technological school. Parents are terrified that this is a replay of the Chibok abductions 4 years ago, from which about 100 girls are still being held hostage. Families immediately petitioned the government to do something quickly, but for 3 days there was no response whatsoever, after which the governor of the state directed families to, quote, take this as from God, go back home and pray for their return, close quote. Nigeria is in its 9th year of war with Boko Haram, although President Buhari repeatedly declares he has defeated the insurgent Islamist militant group. What a surreal nightmare. Ireland's state-run secondary schools cannot assume any longer that their students will receive religious instruction. The government is directing the schools to offer alternative classes, a striking move in a nation where education has for so long been dominated by the Roman Catholic Church. Irish law does already state that the government-run schools cannot require students to take religion classes, which are always dominated by Christian doctrine anyway. But in practice, schools have routinely continued to enroll all students in the courses unless their parents opted out, nor have schools usually offered any alternatives. It's a measure of how much Ireland is changing that the strongest objections to this new policy have come from teachers and administrators complaining not about having less religious instruction, but that the government won't provide funding for alternative classes. Yaha! Generally, all this is a good sign, but the whole thing seems surreal, a triumph in ending a practice, in this case required religious instruction, that should never have existed in the first place. In the category of dubious triumphs, we return to the good old US of A. If you were thinking that women-led films like Wonder Woman and Girls Trip, and even to some extent Star Wars The Last Jedi, signified a sea change because they proved so strong at the box office, think again. There's a new study from San Diego State University's Center for the Study of Women in Television and Film. The director is our good friend Martha M. Lausen, where women actually lost ground in Hollywood, the study shows. Women accounted for 24% of protagonists in the 100 top grossing domestic films of 2017, but that's a decrease of 5 percentage points from the year before. Lausen says, quote, "In an award season when talk about women and gender has been top of mind, we need to separate hyperbole from reality. The numbers do not yet reflect claims of a tectonic shift in the film industry." Close quote. On the upside, though, more women had speaking roles in those films, accounting for, wait for it, 34% of such characters, which is up 2 percentage points from the year before. Whoop-de-doo, 34%. Meanwhile, the percentage of major female characters remained unchanged at only 37%. It's shocking. For women of color, there was a very slight uptick. 16% of female characters who had speaking roles were black, up from 14% in 2016. 7% were Latina, up from 3% the year before, and 7% were Asian, up 1 percentage point from 2016. Again, whoop-dee-doo. Wear solidarity buttons as much as you want on the red carpet, guys, but show us the speaking parts, the leads, and show us the money. Last in the dubious triumphs category, Yale's Whiffenpoofs, founded in 1909, the country's oldest collegiate a cappella group, has decided to admit women. Well, this moved swiftly. Yale became co-ed in 1968, and gender integration was proposed then, and then again in 1987. The debate has been ugly and personal each time. As late as 2016, the Whiffenpoofs voted against admitting women, but a record number of female singers sent in audition tapes anyway and circulated an online petition. Well, the pressure apparently finally worked. This follows, you may recall, on Harvard's Hasty Pudding Club theatricals having announced in January that they would admit women for the first time since 1844. Look, women want to perform. Women want to sing. Women want to be part of the action. So women should have that right, damn it. But I do confess that the furor accompanying such breakthroughs seems ironic to me in a world where women are allowed to speak only a third or less of the time, like Hollywood films, or a world where schoolgirls trying to learn science are abducted, enslaved, and raped while their parents are told to go pray, or a world where being taught how to pray is required to begin with. It all seems to me the definition of surreal. Still, a win is a win. As Eeyore would mutter, sure is a cheerful color. Guess I'll have to get used to it. And now for my next guest. Masih Alinejad is an Iranian journalist and writer. She currently works as a presenter and producer at Voice of America Persian Service, as well as being a reporter on popular satirical TV show On 10, and being a correspondent for Radio Farda, as well as a contributing editor to Iran Wire. She's known for her criticism of Iranian authorities and now lives in exile in New York. She has received numerous human rights awards, including in 2015 the Geneva Summit for Human Rights and Democracy, which is run by UN Watch, gave her its Women's Rights Award for giving a voice to the voiceless in Iran. And indeed she has. Here is Masih. Masih, welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you so much for having me.
I don't know how to say welcome in Persian, but if I did, I would say it.
Say khosh amadi.
Oh, say khosh amadi.
Yeah.
There we go. All right. You are the creator and the energy behind My Stealthy Freedom, which is an online social movement in Iran, and you were the White Wednesdays campaign was your brainchild, and it's now having an enormous effect in Iran. Tell the listeners about both.
My stealthy means you create the moment of freedom that you want to have in stealth, in secret. But now I have to tell you that freedom is not stealthy anymore in Iran because women are brave. They went beyond my Stealthy Freedom campaign. And I have to tell you that my campaign just started from my own experience, my own picture. I just published a picture of myself, running in a beautiful street in London and feeling the wind in my hair. So with this caption, I said, every time when I feel the wind in my hair, it just reminds me of the time like my hair was like a hostage in the hands of the Iranian government. I received a lot of comments from women envying at my freedom from compulsory hijab. Then soon after, I found another picture of myself, which was taken inside Iran without headscarf. And I said, hey, I'm a woman. I know how to bypass the authority and create the moment of freedom that I want.
Yeah.
So I am sure you have plenty of these pictures. Yeah, that was true. And I got bombarded by pictures. That is how my Stealthy Freedom was born. And then I picked up a day, Wednesday, and I picked up a color, white, because I thought, for 3 years being online, now these women needs to identify each other in public because all the media around the world, our government, they know about my Stealthy Freedom. Now this is the time that women can get together.
Yes.
That is why I launched White Wednesdays campaign.
I see. Well, it's incredibly moving because now newspapers carry stories of it's like flash moments of protest or feminist guerrilla warfare without anybody getting physically hurt or killed. A woman will suddenly stand up on a park bench or the hood of a car and whip off her headscarf and just, stand there grinning, feeling the sun and the wind in her hair, and people will gather and applaud her and so forth. And then, then she leaps down and disappears and the police come and there's nobody there. So it's like these boom, 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 little flash revolts all over the place. But a lot of women are doing this, and some of them have in fact been arrested and are in jail, aren't they?
Yeah, there are a lot of women who participated the movement called now the Girls of Revolution Street. But the thing is, Iranian security forces attacked them, beaten up them, pushed them down from the platform to keep them silent. But the thing is, these women never going to give up. I still receive a lot of videos from women and men getting together and protesting against compulsory hijab. That shows that arresting women, threatening them, you cannot just keep them silent.
Yes, it's so interesting because Iran, of course, pretends that it is far more liberal, and it is true. Women can vote in Iran, which they cannot do in Saudi Arabia. Women can drive in Iran, but the compulsory.
But this is 21st century.
Exactly. No.
Women can vote. We want to choose our trust as well.
No, of course. But the irony is that the competition is over these things that shouldn't have been in place to begin with. The compulsory hijab is ridiculous. I mean, and it's interesting that you never know what will be the flashpoint. I mean, in Saudi Arabia, which is different, of course, religiously and it's Arab, not Persian. Persian. I mean, many differences, but their driving was, was a flashpoint for women. Hijab is at the moment the flashpoint for women in Iran, and with a backing of a lot of men as well. So, has it become tied in with the student protest? Is it a separate vein that feeds into the same sea? What's the relationship, do you think?
I think in Iran, women are fighting for having freedom to choose their own lifestyles. So they picked up hijab because this is just the most visible symbol of oppression. Mm-hmm. More than 60% of universities are women in Iran. Mm-hmm. And these government think that, okay, these women are not mature enough to make their own lifestyle.
Oh,
that's ridiculous in the 21st century. So that is why I don't think these women are fighting against a piece of cloth or, they're really, it's more than that. They don't want any religious interference in their own life or any religion interference in politics. They want to be their own decision maker. That's all.
Yeah. What do you think the possibilities are for the future? I mean, I think ultimately the progressive forces will win, but how many lives and how many years?
I am full of hope. Although I lost my family, I left my friends, my books, my memories, everything behind, but I never lose hope. You know why? Because I get my hope and energy from those women inside Iran who putting themselves in danger, risking their lives, and they just standing up for their rights. And they know this is a punishable crime, but they're doing it because now they understand this is their civil disobedience. Yeah. And that is why I don't think we have to wait and celebrate a specific day, which we call it victory. The victory is with women right now.
Exactly. The process itself is the victory.
Exactly. That's what I mean. The process itself is a victory because for 4 decades, we never had the chance to be heard. All you hear from the media inside Iran, just women in hijab. We've been censored for 40 years. Yes. But right now, these are the women leading the movement within the society. And the loudest voice you are hearing from Iran is the voice of these brave women. That is why I think we already won the battle. Because the government of Iran, they have guns and bullets. They have money, power, prison. They have all the national TV and media. Yeah. But the women in Iran, they only have, Facebook, Twitter, a camera, mobile phone. They only have their hair. We don't want to be silent. And now the rest of the world are hearing the women of Iran.
Yes, and it's so moving. What are they being charged with, Masih?
These women are being charged into prison, and now some of them are free on bail, but some of them. The police broke their hands and their legs and injured them. God. But apart from that, this is a sad story. It's a tragedy story that in 21st you get beaten up, you get humiliated by the government of Iran. Why? Because you want to show your hair, you want to choose your own dress code. But the thing is, apart from these punishments, every day when you go out as a woman and you don't wear a proper Islamic hijab, you get humiliated by the police of Iran. Yes. According to the police of Iran, only in 1 year, 3.6 million women were warned and sent to the court just because of not wearing inappropriate hijab.
Right.
And 40,000 cars were impounded within 8 months just because women were driving unveiled in their own car. So you see, these are the punishments that we have been facing for years and years. We had the fear inside our heart, but now this is the government of Iran fear the women. It's not about being arrested. It's about being humiliated. It's about being patronized.
Of course.
It's about being second-class citizen. Let me tell you something. At the same day when one of the brave women called Shaparak went on a platform and protest against compulsory hijab. She was just waving her headscarf peacefully. You know what happened? There was a female politician, the foreign minister of Netherlands, went to my country, met with the government of Iran, and she obeyed compulsory hijab laws without even challenging it. That is called humiliation.
Yes.
That breaks our heart.
Now, you yourself, you are out of Iran, and although you're still an Iranian journalist and writer, and your work gets into Iran, right, via Radio Farda.
I am not out of Iran. I remember when my mother used to tell me, if somebody kicked you out from a room and locked the door, you would be able to look around and find a window to get yourself into the same room. Now they kicked me out from Iran, but social media, they are like my windows. I live and breathe with the news of Iran.
Yes.
So they could kick me out from my country, but they couldn't get Iran and my country out of my heart.
Out of you.
I am there
That's
in Iran.
right. Yes, of course. No, I just meant that, you yourself have suffered over this because you can't see your mother. You can't visit your mother. I mean, there's been a lot of pain in your forced exile. Even though you found a way to be incredibly useful and active in the face of it. I know that you're coming out with a book later this year, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us at that point about the book.
Of course, I would be more than happy to talk about my book and my journey, because it shows millions of Iranian women still fighting for their personal freedom.
It's wonderful. I look forward to that. You'll come back later this year. We will talk about the book. But in the meanwhile, thank you for giving us background and also updates on my stealthy freedom, my no longer so stealthy freedom, my I stand up in public and demand it freedom, and how it started and White Wednesdays. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm really full of hope, and I'm sure that the rest of the world can understand that how it means to resist, and they have to, keep the sisterhood and understand that these women who are putting themselves in danger, they have to be recognized. Thank you so much.
And we've got to take one last pause here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be right back with those fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back to some fighting words. Last week I referred to the origins of the Second Amendment and to its original intent. The volume of listener response, stunned at hearing facts I mentioned in passing, made me realize it was time to revisit this subject in greater depth. I'd done just that a few years ago on this program, but there are lots of new listeners, and besides, in this information age, facts can get buried under so-called information. Some scholars still disagree with aspects of this finding, but it's pretty well-documented history, thanks to the work of Roger Williams School of Law professor Carl D. Bogus in 1998, as well as that of historian Richard Hildreth as early as 1840, work on the antebellum South, and in the 1990s, 1995 to be exact, of Clayton Kramer, on Second Amendment basis for the black codes adopted after the Civil War, requiring emancipated Africans and African Americans, but not whites, to obtain a license before carrying or possessing firearms. Well, by now we all have the words of the Second Amendment hammered into our brains. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You know the real reason why the Second Amendment was created and ratified? And why, by referring to state, it means state and does not mean country? Well, let's take them one by one. It was created to preserve the militias in the southern states, and was a demanded promise to get Virginia's vote for the Constitution. Founders Patrick Henry and George Mason made that a condition and were backed by the father of the Constitution, James Madison. The South's state militias also had another name. They were commonly called slave patrols, and they were decidedly well regulated by the slaveholding states. For instance, Georgia had laws requiring all plantation owners or their male white employees to be armed members of the Georgia militia and, quote, to make monthly searches of all Negro houses for offensive weapons and ammunition and administer 20 lashes to any slave found outside plantation grounds, close quote. This was deemed necessary to preserve the institution of slavery. Today, history-deprived citizens may wonder why the enslaved population seemed so passive, because we were never taught anything else. But the truth is that by the time of the Constitution's ratification, hundreds of uprisings by these enslaved people had already erupted across the South. Historian Hildreth observed that violence was frequently employed in the South both to subordinate slaves and to intimidate abolitionists, as well as being an improved way to avenge perceived insults to, quote, manhood and personal status, close quote. The enslaved always outnumber the enslavers, so such a system requires relentless enforcement, precisely the role of the well-regulated militias. Indeed, if those militias were to be disbanded or relocated, the economic and socio-political structure of the South would have collapsed. No wonder such founders as George Mason, owner of over 300 slaves, insisted on the Second Amendment. So did slaveholder Patrick Henry, a Southern evangelical Christian theocrat. More on him later. The Southern states feared that Article 1, Section 8, which empowered the federal government to raise and supervise a militia, would permit the swallowing up of their state militias, absorbing those local bodies from slavery-enforcing private armies into a national military, one even, oh shock, permitting service by slaves, an army that might someday free slaves. At the 1788 ratifying Constitutional Convention, Patrick Henry said all this flat out, quote, if there should happen an insurrection of slaves, the country cannot be said to be invaded. They cannot, therefore, suppress it. In my state, Virginia, there are 236,000 blacks, and there are many in several other states, but there are few or none in the northern states, closed quote. Alarmed that government power over the state militias could be used to strip the southern states of their slave patrols, Henry added, have they, the government, not power to provide for the general defense and welfare? May they not think that these call for the abolition of slavery? Close quote. Madison, a slaveholder himself, then revised the relevant amendment, changing the word country to the word state, meaning state, not as a synonym for nation, but literally as in one of the United States, thus ensuring that the South could maintain its slave patrol militias. Oh yes, and Patrick Henry? Well, he had fought Jefferson bitterly over the Virginia Act of Religious Freedom, a document Jefferson wrote, which, separating religion and government, became the model for the Constitution's First Amendment. Patrick Henry openly wanted a Christian theocracy. And one thing more, this give me liberty or give me death guy not only was a slave owner, but he also imprisoned his wife, Sarah, declaring her mad and constraining her for the rest of her life in the cellar of his plantation manor. This, he announced, was a merciful alternative to putting her in an asylum. It appears, from spotty reports of the time, that her madness was simple melancholia. So much for right-wing interpretations of the sacrosanct Second Amendment, our mythified defense against British tyranny, which actually had nothing to do with the war for independence, but everything to do with tyrannizing the abducted and enslaved African population. Knowledge is power. Shove that up your barrel, NRA. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMCLive.com for the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes, and at iTunes, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter, and you can check out my website and blog at robinmorgan.net and find me on Facebook and Twitter, too. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, and our founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.